Welcome, everyone, to the Retro Pool Guy podcast. I'm your host, the Retro Pool Guy, and I'm joined here with my producer and co-host, the Drunken Beard, Nick. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm pretty good. Just getting myself mentally prepared for 6,000 miles of driving this next couple weeks.
Yeah, you got a lot of traveling coming up. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So we're doing our season finale today of our first season. Pretty exciting stuff. And today we're going to be covering MegaMan 3. But first, I want to dive into something about our special guest. So, a long time ago, there was a TV show called Video Power. Some of you may or may not remember this. It was back in 1990. It only ran for 2 seasons, so 1990 to 1992. And the first 2 seasons were actually a little bit different from each other. The first season, you had your host, Johnny Arcade, and that was played by a guy named, it's hard to pronounce, Stevie Pazowski. Okay, so he was the host, he was Johnny Arcade, and they would have a cartoon similar to Captain N. You remember Captain N, Nick? You remember that one? Yes. Okay. So similar to that, but imagine it's a claim. Okay. So the characters in the cartoon it was a cop from Narc. His name was Max Force. You had Kuros from Wizards and Warriors, and you even had Bigfoot. Like the monster truck was a character in the cartoon. Okay. So and then
Nice.
they would show the cartoon, and then Johnny Arcade would do some previews of some new games coming out, give out some tips, and secrets, stuff like that. I guess it wasn't doing so great. The cartoon was cheesy, uh, but so in the second season they changed it up. They kept Johnny Arcade, and they added another host. His name was Terry Lee Torok, similar to Turok, but I guess they're not related. And they turned it into a game show. Okay, so they would have kids come on, and it was still all about video games, and they would answer trivia questions. Then they would bring kids up, and they would all play a game against each other, and then the two top kids would go on to the next round, and you win prizes, and it just looked like a lot of fun. I watched this show quite a few times when I was a kid, man, and I always dreamed about going on it. I was like, man, that's got to be awesome. Like, how do you get on these shows? Never happened for me. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I'm sure a lot of other kids, you know, dreamed about going on this show. So luckily, found someone just by happen chance. Let me introduce to you. His name is Jack, and he was a contestant on Video Power. How you doing, Jack?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Uh, so I wanted to we met on Twitter just by happen chance, right? Like
Yep.
I vaguely remember how it happened, but it was on some post, and then we were just talking, and you just brought it up. You were like, "Hey, I was on Video Power," and I got shocked. Honestly, I was like, "Oh my god, I never met anyone who was on this show," and then I got to see the video, and you actually won the show, so you got to go through the whole feel of the show. It was fantastic. And by the way, folks, I am going to post a link on my Twitter to this episode. So if you want to watch that episode of Video Power with our guest on it as a kid, he's a real cute kid. You're going to love it. Uh, check it out. I will have the link up there for you. It's on YouTube. It's a Video Power, Mega Man 3, and what was the other game? Help me remember here, Jack.
Little Nemo.
Little Nemo and the Dream Master. That's right. So I gotta ask first thing, Jack, how did you find out about this show?
Well, backing up to what you were saying about that first season being the cartoon. And by the way, that cartoon does not hold up. I tried watching it on YouTube maybe like a year ago, and it can't even sit through those episodes anymore. But
It
when I was 9, I really liked it.
Yeah, they're not good.
No, like Captain N still holds up a little bit, but this is no good. So
They try.
anyway, I guess near the end of that season, they started showing at the end of the episode, like, oh, if you want to be on Video Power, and like a little information. And I thought that was weird. I mean, I was a kid, and I didn't really look into it that way. But then I think it was like maybe in our newspaper that Video Power was coming to this local like arcade place. They called it like an indoor amusement park. It was called Spaceplex, which is on Long Island. And I remember I don't remember a whole lot about it. I was 10 at the time. But I remember going and we went into this back room and the hosts were there and they talked to us about the show a little bit. And I remember paperwork. I really honestly don't remember how I was chosen, but I was. And I was told I was going to be playing Mega Man 3, which I was really excited about because I had that game. I knew that game like the back of my hand, loved it. And then I mean, a couple I don't know, weeks later maybe, I remember that my parents got a phone call like sort of confirming my involvement, but saying that I was going to be playing Tecmo Bowl. And I was
Oh,
like, and again, I'm 10, and so I remember being very upset. I've never played that game before. I don't have it. I don't know what I'm gonna do. And long story short, my parents asked them if if maybe I could be on a future episode with a different game or something. And eventually they said, "It looks like we're gonna be bringing Mega Man 3 back later on, but it's also gonna include this little Nemo game." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Like, whatever." So we bought Little Nemo so I could practice, so I could learn that game, and I got really good at that one too. And the show was filmed in Kaufman Astoria Studios in Queens, and so I assume all the contestants were local to here. Again, I'm from Long Island, and I assume people were just from, our tri-state area, and that's why you from Houston probably never had a shot on being on.
yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, so that's how I found out about it.
Okay, so the process of getting selected then was basically just a bunch of paperwork. But your parents, man, kudos to them for looking out for you. I mean, making sure that you got to play the game that you know instead of just, hey, sticking you with Tecmo Bowl. Sorry, kid.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's great. Uh, so once you're there, uh, the first part of the show, I believe, was you had to stump the guy, right? Johnny
Oh yeah.
Arcade. Do you remember by chance what your question was?
If you give me a second, I can probably remember the question at least kind of vaguely. But
And if
um,
you were able to stump Johnny Arcade.
well, I wasn't able to, but that part of the show was scripted, so I never had a chance to. Occasionally, in fact, one contestant on the same episode as I was did stump him, and he got a prize for that. And I remember that didn't sit well with me because it was scripted. Like he had the answer to my question, and he had something he was supposed to say incorrectly to the other question. So I'm like, oh, this
Mm.
kid gets he got like a basketball for asking, for being chosen to ask the question that
So
stumped
that
him.
part was rigged. I did not
Yes.
know that. Shenanigans. Man.
Absolutely.
That was
Reality
Yes.
TV in a nutshell.
Um, I do remember that my question was based on Battletoads. I think I had to ask about rashes and zits and pimples, which are the names of the three Battletoads. And so from there, um, he had something scripted, interesting to say about that.
I can't believe that part was scripted. I really honestly thought that those kids came up with their own questions. Uh, so you answer the question, or I'm sorry, he answers the questions, rigged apparently, and then you go on to play. The first game was Mega Man 3, right?
Yes.
In the episode. Now, I gotta say, I did watch this episode a couple of times, and I wish that that girl's parents that was playing with you. I don't know if you remember everyone that played with you, but there's a girl that plays with you, and the camera pans to each one of you and how you're progressing as the timer's going. And this
Hmm.
poor girl never made it off the first
Yep.
part, and
I
I
can tell
just
you.
felt so terrible. I was like, "Who did that to her? Like, why didn't she have parents like yours? Like,
Well,
that's not fair."
it makes me wonder if she was supposed to play a different game and then they called her and said, "Hey, this is the game you're playing," like they almost did to me with Tecmo Bowl. Like she didn't seem to be very familiar with the game. I do remember that pretty clearly. It was the not the initial Sparkman stage, but when you revisit the Sparkman stage and it sort of changed up a little bit, which I always thought was a cool mechanic in Mega Man 3, the way they reused those stages. And it wasn't just her. There was another contestant who only made it as far as the second screen. And there's like a spider that climbs the ladder there, and he didn't know how to kill it because you can't. He just had his normal, default weapon, and you have to be able to shoot up to kill the spider. And I guess I don't know if he never played the game either. He didn't know what to do.
Unfortunate that they would kinda, you know, I guess, put it on the kids like that, surprisingly. But I guess
Yeah.
at the same time, maybe not. Depends how you wanna look at it, I guess, you know? Be
I,
ready for any game.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
true.
mean, they kind of tell you at least what game you'll be playing. So I mean, it would be kind of up to the family or whatever to actually buy it and or rent it from a store. I guess to get familiar with it.
I give
Yeah,
them
there
a
were
chance.
definitely a couple of weeks where if I had to play Tecmo Bowl, I could have learned it in a couple of weeks. I probably wouldn't have been any good at it, but
Well, it paid off for you because you got to advance to the next round, which was another round, it was trivia questions, right?
right, yes.
Yeah. Uh, didn't go too well for you in that round. That
I
seemed
mean,
really tough.
not only didn't it go well for me, but I was a little antsy on the buzzer. So before he asked the first question, he asked, "What video game would you take with you if you were alone on a desert island?" And I buzzed in thinking it was the first question. I thought it was going to be like Star Tropics or something related to that Treasure Island, maybe. And then I realized, no, he was just, making small talk. So I had to say something on the fly. And I remember I said Mega Man 1.
That's the pressure, though. I can imagine. I mean, how old were you when you were on this show?
I was 11.
11 years old, and I'm sure there's cameras and producers, and it looks like there's somewhat of an audience, and they're all
Yes.
staring at you, you know. So I can imagine that that's a lot of pressure for a kid to stand there and answer questions on the fly. So don't feel bad. You still would have done better than me. You still, yeah,
um, the way it worked with the point system was the first round where we all played Mega Man 3. That was to see which two people would advance to the next part, but it also served as a tiebreaker. So I happened to do the best in that round. So if I was tied at the end of the game, that would have pushed me over the top. With the trivia questions, the total points at stake there was 50 points, and then the round after that where we played the next game was another 50 points. So it was possible for me to have not gotten any trivia questions right, which almost happened, and but then still win the Little Nemo part. As it happens, I wound up getting one question right. They sort of questioned me a little bit on, like I said something really close, and they decided to give it to me. I don't remember what all the questions were, but on a couple of them I knew the answer, and the other kid was just faster on the buzzer. That happens too.
do you remember the suit that you had to wear during those
Yes,
questions, the
very, very
Velcro
well.
helmet?
Quick point about that suit is that initially they have them in different sizes because some of us are. I was a little kid, and there were some really really tall kids. And the initial suit they gave me was way too big on me. So I remember it was commercial break. They had to extend the commercial break because they were like, "Oh, we're gonna have to get. Is there a smaller suit we can get this kid?" Yeah, that suit was fun. They and we had it on since the question round because instead of just awarding you points, they literally stick these things to your suit. And there were like I think there were pizza toppings. I know one was a mushroom. They might have been like slices of pizza. I don't really remember all of them. But if you get a question right, they stick something on your suit to show you what you got.
Yes, yes, I believe, the other kid got the Harlem Globetrotters game
Yes.
for
Um,
answering a question right.
That might have been the one question was not for points, but for I think for that game, and it was a music-based question, which was they play a track and you had to say what game it was from, and man, he buzzed in immediately.
He was pretty good, man, when it came
Yeah,
to those questions.
he was on top of it. I had no shot.
Well, I dubbed you in this, episode the comeback kid, because in the next round, you took it to him. You guys played, another game, like you mentioned, it was, for the 50 points, and this is when you played, Little Nemo, right? The
Mhm.
Dream Master? Uh, so you said that you were able to get a hold of that game before and you got some practice in, right?
Yeah, I wound up really liking it too. It's not very long, but it's a good little game. You're a kid and you have candy, and there are certain animals that you can feed the candy to, and then that animal goes to sleep, and then you sort of merge with that animal and wear its suit, so you have powers. So you give candy to a frog, and then you can jump really high. You give candy to a bumblebee, and you can fly around. There's a fish, stuff like that, and it's only like I don't know 5 or 6 levels in this game, and I remember on this episode, we played the first level of the game, so it's very familiar.
Sure, you got plenty of practice on that one.
Yep.
It definitely paid off because you won. Uh, can't remember the score off the top of my head, but basically they judged it by how many keys you found because that's how this game works. Is, you had to find the 6 keys to advance to the next level. So whoever got the most keys got to advance to the final round, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you remember how many keys you got?
Um, maybe I'm gonna say 4, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, we'll have to watch that video again for the
Yeah.
Mhm.
details there. Uh, so you won, man. That had to feel great.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
you get to go on to their prize run at the end. So this is where the Velcro suit comes back into play. Uh, for winning the game, you got to run through what was it's basically like a store, and
Yeah,
whatever you could grab and stick to your suit, you got to take home. Is that right?
that's right, and man, if I could do that over again, I would've come out with a lot more stuff. I was for reasons I cannot comprehend as an adult, I was very choosy. I'm
Mhm.
running through
Really?
this store and you get 30 seconds. And I'm running through and I'm like, oh, and I was specifically looking for one thing. I don't even remember what it was or if I got it, but I'm like, nah, I won't take that one. Yes, yes, this one I want. And why would you do that when it's like the goal of this is get as much stuff because you get to keep everything, right? The only rule is that you have to run to the top and jump down the slide before the timer expires. So I'm running through and I grab a bunch of things and I even remember there's like a it's not a maze, but there are a couple of different ways to get to that last part. And there's a little staircase and like a ramp. And I went up the staircase and I took a wrong turn and I started going down the ramp instead of toward the slide. And you can see the host, you can see Johnny Arcade like grab me by the shoulders, like, no, it's this way. And I ran and I dove in the tube just as the time was expiring. I think they were pretty generous. You know, at the time I didn't know because the show hadn't aired yet, but I definitely watched every episode of that show when it aired. And I think only once that I can remember did a kid not make it down the slide. And even then they were like, oh, you could have just kept going.
Mhm.
There were definitely a couple of kids who went down like a second after and they never cared. Like it was just supposed to be a for fun type thing. You know, you don't want to see a kid win the episode and then like not come home with anything.
Yeah, they don't want to leave crying kids on camera,
Yeah.
But, I noticed that part, when, someone I was gonna ask you about it, I'm glad you brought it up because I noticed that when you were running through that somebody grabs you and he, like, turns you around and he's like, "Go this way to leave." I was gonna ask, I was like, "Was that a producer or somebody?" But that was actually Johnny Arcade, huh, that
Yes, Mr. Arcade
wanted you
himself.
Mr. Arcade himself. How was that guy? Was he cool? Were they cool? Or were they kinda
No, they were cool. He was a little weird. Not on this episode, but on the second episode, which we'll talk about in a minute. There was a part during the commercial break where he was just like, we were down in the area where we're playing the game, and he's up where his seat is, and it's just like a step up, and he's looking down, and for some reason he was pretending that there were sharks. He's like, watch out, there's sharks, get out of there. And it was just, I was like, are you high, man? I don't know what's going on right now. Other than that one thing, it was fine. The other guy, Terry Lee Torok, actually went on to host the Nintendo World Championship in '93. So he did a couple other related things.
wow. I know the other guy, Johnny Arcade, he went on to do some, like, small roles in some TV shows like
Oh, okay.
that. Yeah, he, did, like, the Law& and Order and a couple of those things. I'm not sure the actual parts, but it's out there.
Like extra number 17. But I'd like
Yeah,
to see that.
yeah.
You know, I'd love to see that guy in anything but the game show role just to see what he's like.
uh,
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Um,
did
so
did they record more than one episode at a time and have you sit in the audience for the other two, or 3 episodes, or did they just do 1 episode?
So I wouldn't have known the answer to that, except that I dug up my Video Power items that I still have from 1991, and I was reading through it, and it's got the schedule of recording. So I have a record of like what day I recorded and what day my episode aired, and they recorded 4 episodes a day.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and it was like 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. So I'm pretty sure that um I watched one other episode that I wasn't on in addition to the one I was on, and then I think they refreshed the audience. They
Ah,
try to make it look like the contestants are randomly selected from the audience
yeah.
at the beginning of the show, which was not the case. But I think just they let I don't remember who I brought, but they let us bring like a couple of family members and a couple of friends, and I think it was just to have an audience without making it like a
Mm,
public thing.
yeah.
And so between the contestants on the 2 episodes and the people you brought, that filled up the audience.
Pretty cool, man. So you won the episode. Do you still have all those prizes?
I do. I interesting because I knew exactly, which things I grabbed. Like I said, I was a little bit too choosy, and it was supposed to come within 7 to 10 business days or something, and I remember it didn't. And again, like,
Hang on, hang on, hang on. So they stick the stuff to you with Velcro,
yeah.
and then tell you it'll be there in 7 to 10 days. They take it
So
back.
I also thought that was weird, but in retrospect, again, they were taping 4 episodes a day, so they probably just put everything back in the maze so that the next contestant could do the same thing.
Why not just have a
Mm,
box of games laying
Ah, you're
around?
not wrong.
mm, it was probably more for tax reasons, as well,
That's
for
Could
actually
be.
that's a question I wanted to ask too. Is did your parents have to pay taxes on the prizes? Because it was filmed in New York, but I know in California, like with The Price is Right, they win all that stuff, but then
Right.
they go backstage and it's like, hey, you got to pay all the tax before you can have anything.
Um, I don't know the answer to that, but because the amount that, I had like 10 or 12 games, and I think because it was only worth probably under a threshold that they probably didn't. My mom actually used to enter a lot of contests and would occasionally win things. So she had like a contest newsletter that she would get, and
Mhm.
she would enter sweepstakes and she would write essays and things. And occasionally she'd win something a little bit more significant. And I remember that she had to pay taxes on those things. So it's definitely something I wondered about. And if I had gone on to win the $10,000 scholarship or something larger like that, I'll bet I would have. But in this instance, my guess is that they didn't have to pay any taxes.
Eh,
Yeah,
most
probably the. Sorry, go
Well,
ahead, man.
most likely, also, since you made 0 money that year, because I doubt you were working full time,
I
you
was
didn't also
not.
reach, a threshold on that, but you generally for, like, winnings and stuff, if it's under a 500 or $1,000, you really don't have to claim it.
Okay.
But also, kid, uh, no income.
True. But back to your previous question. So yeah, I was waiting for them to mail me the prizes, and at one point, I asked my parents if they would call. So they called, and they just, oh yeah, they'll be there soon. Okay, so eventually, I had to be patient. They did come. I did not get the exact same games that I won. Uh, I'm trying to remember if there's anything I was expecting that I didn't get, because that I'm not sure. But I do know that I got at least 1 or 2 games that I hadn't plucked from the maze. So I don't know if they they just threw them in there just because, or if it was an accident, or if they were guessing. I have no idea how. But I think their record keeping wasn't exactly the best.
Extra prizes though. I mean, you can't complain. Do you remember which
Oh yeah.
ones what titles those were off the top of your head back then?
I'm almost certain I didn't pull the Punisher out of the maze, but I definitely received that from Video Power, and I loved that game, by the way.
Punisher for NES.
Yeah, these are all NES. I had a couple of Game Boy games. So I can think of a few that I definitely went off the show. I know I got Dragon Warrior 2. I know I got Castlevania 3. I know I got The Punisher. I know for Game Boy I got Cat Trap and a game called Harmony. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what else, but those I definitely remember. and I have them all still.
That's pretty sweet. And then, so since you won that episode, you got to come back again, right, on Friday for the like a championship episode. Is that correct?
Yes, they had a really interesting format for the show, which I thought was great at the time. Where it was a four contestant at a time show. So the winners from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday became the four contestants on the Friday episode. And then those winners all would eventually come back at the end of the season to do a finals week. And the winner of that week won a $10,000 college scholarship. And I think there were other prizes as well. That's just what I remember. But yeah, I got to go back for the Friday show. And the taping was 1 week later, which happened to be my first day of school in the seventh grade. So had to call in sick. But then I remember on the second day of school in seventh grade, I was explaining to my teachers where I was, and
Awesome.
it was a little weird. Um, but yeah, so I went back for the Friday show, and uh, man, what I remember about that show is that I was cocky. I went in. It was just 1 week after I won. I was feeling good, and I went in, and I was like, "So what happens when I win this episode?"
Oh
And
wow.
and I remember they looked at me like, "Hang on, because it didn't happen yet. Don't forget these other kids won on their day too." And of course, I did not win the episode. So, looking back on it, oops. But yeah, we went back a week later, and a similar experience. We had the canned questions again. We had the first round, and I could be wrong, but I think the games were flipped. I think we did Little Nemo in the first round, and I advanced to the final two. I once again did very poorly in the questions round, but I got one one of the questions correct. So then I had to, I think it was Mega Man 3 at the beginning, because I was aware that I was one of the top two, but that someone else was ahead of me. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to get a question, and I'm gonna have to win the second round, or else I'm not gonna win this. And so I got one question right, and we advanced to the other round, which I believe then was Little Nemo, and I did not win.
Didn't pull it out this time.
Now, now it was a level I really liked, and I was good, but I remember I died at one point, and I guess the other kid probably didn't, so he was able to, get ahead and get more keys than me.
But still, that's quite an experience, man. Like, not a lot of people got to do anything like that. So I'm really glad that you decided to come on here when I asked you, and tell us the story because it's really cool. A lot of us have seen this show, and we've always wondered what it was like to be there on that. There's all kinds of shows that were on back then, like Nick Arcade and Video Power, even Legends of the Hidden Temple for
Oh
people who
man, I
remember
remember
that.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Guts, y'all remember Guts?
Oh yeah,
I wanted to be on Guts so
I wanted
bad.
a piece of that aggro crag so much, but
Yes, give it to me. Oh man.
they're
So
like, oh, it's filmed in Florida as I'm living in a small town in Washington State.
right. Uh, so, but you've hung on to those games. You have a pretty big collection now.
I do. So, the original Nintendo Entertainment System was is the first console I ever owned, and I just loved this thing, and especially after I was on Game Show, and I started, that probably doubled my collection at the time. I got like another 10 games, and I was probably up to maybe 30 games by the time I moved on to a different system. But I went back to retro collecting when I graduated college, so that was around 2001. And I remember, and this was back when you could very easily find Nintendo games at GameStop for cheap. And for a while, I was making it my mission to get a complete NES collection. And I didn't do it, but I do have over 650 NES games.
Oh
That's as
wow.
far as I got. Yeah. Then they stopped selling retro titles at GameStop altogether for a long time. And when they brought them back many years later, they had a huge markup. And now, if you try to collect, I mean, games that I bought for $3 at GameStop are over $100 now. Like, so, if I ever sold, I probably have some good money there. But it's probably impossible for me to really complete that collection at this point.
Yeah, it's gotten out of control. Some of those games are into thousands of dollars now. It's
Yeah.
It's still
like, come
600.
on,
That's almost a complete NES collection.
that's a
Yeah, there
fantastic.
are over 800, and so it's less than 150 off, I think, from the complete collection.
Sitting at like 30. I feel like I have nothing
Yeah, right. Nah,
now.
I since the prices of everything has gone up on games, I decided to collect hardware instead. So
Mm.
I just use those Evercarts for pretty much everything at this point.
Could invest in those. I don't know why I haven't yet, to be honest.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard good things, but never tried it.
Yeah, 180 bucks or so. It's a little steep on some of them. Neo Geo one is around $700, but if you ever
Ooh.
price any of these games out, you're like, that's only one or two games, so I could have them
Wow.
all.
very cost efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, how do you guys feel about jumping into some Mega Man 3?
sounds good.
Mm.
All right. Before we do that, though, I want to talk about one more thing with Jack. He brought up something that I thought was super cool, and Nick, I think you're gonna dig this, man. You're really gonna dig this. This is about Mega Man. Jack, you shared a link with me earlier, just as we were talking. What, maybe an hour before we got on the show, of
Yep.
something you created on. Help me out. Which graphing calculator was it? A T eighty
TI
five.
83.
TI 83. Nick, how familiar does that sound to you?
Very familiar. I also have modded a or 92 that I've overclocked.
Oh, nice.
Jack, Jack, tell him what you were able to do with it.
So when I was in high school, this is an aside here, but I was on the math team, and we had this away match where we went to Penn State, and we had to have a graphing calculator, and so we're on the bus, and there's another kid who's like, "Hey, do you have the games?" I was like, "I don't know what you mean." And so these graphing calculators had programming capabilities, and there's a link cable, and he's like, "Oh, you give me a calculator," and he loads up Tetris, and I forget what else, maybe like Arkanoid. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And a year later, maybe the same year, I got internet access for the first time, dial up back in the mid 90s. And I remember looking into it like, oh, maybe there's more information on this. Uh, and I found that you could download these games and you could transfer them to your calculator. And so I started making a collection of these. And then next step naturally was to start programming things myself. And so it decided, at the time, my favorite games were Mega Man games, and I decided I'm going to make a Mega Man game. And so it started out, and this is at the time I had a TI 82, and the TI basic language is very kind of rudimentary with what you can do.
Mhm.
But I built a functional Mega Man 82 game, and I had this whole blueprint for how everything was gonna go, boss weaknesses, password system, everything. And I made this, and around this time, people figured out how to hack the calculators and access the root assembly language. And so I said, okay, like this is going to be a lot better. The games that were coming out were like basically Game Boy level games. And so I taught myself how to code an assembler, and I created an assembly version of Mega Man 82, and now it was on the 83. So I made this Mega Man 83 ASM, and it had 8 robot masters with weaknesses, password system, which is probably my favorite part because that was kind of a novel thing to have this calculator game, and instead of saving progress, you have this password system. I figured out how it worked in the Mega Man games. How they had like a certain number of dots, and you have a dot in one place if a robot master is defeated, and a different place if it's not. And then one of the dots would move around depending on how many energy tanks you had. So I was able to create this recreation of the password system. My robot masters were I'm not going to remember all of them, but I have like Madman, Freshman, Mailman, Doorman. That's a, I don't remember all of them. And then instead of Dr. Wiley, the boss was like a TI calculator. His name was TI. And fast forward to just 3 years ago. And for some reason, I was Googling this and I came across a bunch of YouTube videos. There were people speedrunning my game. And I just think that's incredible. Just the
Yeah,
fact that
I'm
it's
watching one right now. I was like,
that's
oh,
awesome.
someone are speed running it.
Not even the fact that this game still exists so much later, but that there's like this little community of people who are like, how fast can I get through this thing? I and by all accounts, it's not a great game. There the levels, there are some enemies. I did come up with 8 different powers, but it's mostly just like jumping across gaps and 3 shots on a little bad guy, and then all of the bosses have the same like move left and jump, and then move right and jump pattern. It's I didn't have like AI going on in that.
I
Still, that's
mean,
impressive, man.
yeah, about to say because I used to myself program 83 plus basic stuff, but
Mm.
never on my calculator in high school, and obviously Tetris as well because he had the link cable.
That's right.
But yeah, no, that's very impressive. I'm very blown away. Very cool.
Oh, thank you.
I knew you'd love that, Nick. And hopefully our listeners love that too. But let's go ahead and jump into Mega Man 3, huh? Released by Capcom in 1990, which blows my mind. I was only 5 years old. The game came out. Believe it. Uh, Still, one of the greatest platformers of all time. We all know how the Mega Man game works. You got your 8 robot masters. You defeat them. You get their powers. You use their powers against other robots. Find their weaknesses. Move on to the Wily stages. Mega Man 3 is one of the best, in my opinion, of the original 6 on NES. Um, but a little interesting fact that I found out while looking into this game, and Nick, you're gonna have to help me with these names, buddy.
Oh,
So
yep.
Akira Kitamura,
Kitamura,
who
yep.
originally worked on the first 2 Mega Man games, quit in mid-production of Mega Man 3. So they filled it in with artists, and he's also a video game producer. E.G. Infamune. Infun. Got that?
Uh,
So he worked on the game, took over, and he is actually kind of disappointed with it. He said that he didn't like the way the company was pushing the game out. Like he loved working on the first 2, but then apparently this third one, that he said that his superiors didn't quite understand what a Mega Man was. They changed names. He just didn't like. He said the game was rushed, and if they would have had more time, would have made it better. Which I find hard to believe how they could have made this game too much better. But I don't know. I guess we'll talk about that. So, Jack, tell us some of your first memories of playing Mega Man 3.
Well, to start, I very clearly remember that I received Mega Man as a Christmas present. It was the thing I wanted the most for Christmas that year, and I remember I got other things, and I hadn't received it, and we were going to church, and I was like, it's the one thing I really wanted. And unbeknownst to me, my mom had run back in from the car saying, "Oh, I forgot something," but she was putting out like the last big present for my sister and I. So when I came back from church, there was like a note from Santa Claus that said, "Oh, hey, forgot this one," and I was just so excited because it was, I was in love with Mega Man 2, and so Mega Man 3 just I was just so excited to play it. And did I not only did I open it right away and start playing it on Christmas Day, but I had beaten it by the next day.
Wow.
oh,
It's
wow.
such a great game, and uh, if it had the charging shots that were introduced in Mega Man 4 and later, I think it'd just be the perfect Mega Man game. That's to me, that's the only thing it's lacking. Very very good music, and the music really dropped off after Mega Man 3, in my opinion.
Hmm.
2 and 3 had the best music.
100%.
Um, yeah, really excellent bosses and powers, fun to use, really cool variety. Like nothing like Top Spin. There's not, hasn't been anything like that since Hard Man, where you're actually your fist comes off of you, and a nice variety of powers there. And I really liked, and I assume this was done because of memory limitations for the NES, but I really like the way that they reused those four levels. I think it's Sparkman, Needleman, Gemini Man, and I don't remember which is the other one. But the four levels that were sort of changed up and like ruined, and you go back to them, and midway through the level you fight a robot master from Mega Man 2, and then another one at the end of the level. So in these four levels you're also fighting all of the bosses from Mega Man 2, which is great because you know when you look at all these Mega Man games as a kid, I always wondered like, oh, I wonder which of these weapons would be effective on the robot masters from this other game, and that was really the one time that they went and they did that. And so I thought that was really clever. In one of those levels, and I distinctly remember this from the first time I played the game. Those little Mets, those guys with the helmets who kind of peek out and shoot at you. Those they're giant versions of those, and you can see them under platforms in one of the levels, and you don't exactly know what they are. There's a clue because there's a little Met there shooting at you, and but it's just the helmet with part of the cross, so you can't
Yeah,
quite tell what it is.
a
And then
little
when you go back,
foreshadowing.
yeah, it's for exactly what it is, yes. And then you go back to that level, and that barrier is gone, and it's now a giant Met that you have to fight and kill. And I just remember being like, "Whoa, what is this thing?" Yeah, that's a great game. Really good Dr. Wily levels as well. I do remember that the final boss it took me forever because the way they do it in these games is they don't just make it so that only one weapon is extra effective on Wily. They make it that only one weapon can even hurt Wily. So you have to figure out what it is, and it's always the one that's hardest to hit him with. And in Mega Man
Oh,
3, it's
yeah.
actually you can the last boss you can actually beat him with the hard knuckle, or if you can jump and time it just right, you can beat him with the top spin.
Top spin, really?
Yeah, you have to. There's like these floating platforms. You have to ride it to the top, and you have to jump and land
Yeah.
right on him with the top spin. Kills him
See,
instantly.
I did that, but I was using, the snake, search snake. So I was standing up on the top platform and then just,
Oh, okay.
jump out and drop a search snake right down in there. It does a pretty good amount of damage. That's what worked for me. So I didn't
Yeah.
know that I knew about hard knuckle, but I was like, "Man, I can't." Can't do that. And then, honestly, for the longest time, I thought top spin weapon was just for Shadow Man,
Uh-huh.
and then that was it. Like, I was like, "Okay, that was great," what kind of a waste of a weapon, but then this time, as I was playing through, I figured out, "Oh, this has a lot more uses than what I originally thought." Like, when you fight your clone
Hmm.
uh, top spin weapon. That's what you want to use. You want to get in and out of there as quick as you can. You got to save those precious E tanks. So that's what I used in that. It was top spin and it worked. I was surprised. I didn't know you could use it on Wiley though. That's also
I believe
news.
it's used in a lot of speedruns because it's so effective, but it requires you to really, get that dropped on them.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I probably just sucked at using it this whole time. Like I said, I was only 5 years old when this game was out, and me growing up, it was a little different. Nintendo was already in the house, you know what I mean? So, like, this is one of the first games I remember sitting there, on Friday nights, Saturday nights, we'd rent, something from the video store. This was a rental for us, Mega Man 3, and I'd watch my older brother play, and, it's a one-player game, so I'd have to wait till he went to sleep till I finally got a turn. But
Hmm.
so yeah, that's how I got introduced to this game is we'd rent it, we'd stay up all night playing it. I'd watch him get mad and throw controllers. It was hilarious. Uh, and then yeah, I'd try, but I was 5, so I never got far. I wasn't too good at games when I was that young. I was just getting my feet wet.
Nothing
Uh,
really changed.
ha 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 ha.
Ouch.
Yeah. Hey, I'll have you know, I beat this game several times this time around. I actually, I played it on, I played the Anniversary, collection on PS4. I played the, same type of collection on the DS, and then I played, the original cart on original hardware, which was the most fun way to play this game. The
Hmm.
most challenging and most fun. Absolutely, like, totally got into it. more that way. You don't have all those little, you know, safety net, the save features and all that. You can write down your password, but that's the best you're gonna get.
Yeah,
And
when you play those anniversary editions, the temptation to use the rewind and the save states, that's just it's too hard to avoid that temptation.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
all there. It's right there, and it's easy to use. So, and then I also played the original. Well, I don't want to say it's original because honestly, I don't know where it came from. But I have a version. It's the Japanese version. It's Rockman 3 on my PlayStation Vita.
Hmm.
I played and beat that version as well, and then I tried the Wily Wars on
Hmm.
Sega Genesis, and I didn't get too far in that one. And I think it was because I got so used to playing the other versions that when I switched to the Sega version, it was everything is off just a little bit because they upped the graphics, they didn't really change the levels or how things work, but like it feels like the hitboxes jumping, it's all just slightly off. You know what I mean? From if you're playing like I was 4 days straight of Mega Man 3, and then you switch to the Sega version, and you go to make a jump that you're normally used to making in the other ones, but you don't quite make it because it's just slightly different. So
Yeah,
I didn't
I
beat
do
that one.
think there were a number of small changes in the Wily Wars. I think many more to Mega Man 1 than the others, for balancing and various things. I think you're exactly right about the hitboxes, though. I own that now. So when I was a kid, do you guys remember the Sega Channel?
Of
Oh yeah,
course.
Oh yeah, so I had the Sega Channel growing up, and I remember
Jealous.
what I remember when
right.
Wily Wars popped up on it, and I didn't know it at the time, but this was not released in the U.S. So I had no way of even knowing this game really existed. I know it was released in Japan. I believe it was released in Europe, but not in the U.S. at the time. And the way it's supposed to work is that you can play through all three games, and then there's like extra stuff you can do at the end. Sega Channel had had like it was kind of a glitchy service, and they tell you up front like whatever you're playing you can only expect to keep one save game. If you try to save a second game, it's likely to overwrite the other game save. So I would stick to one thing until I beat it and then go to something else. With Mega Man Wily Wars, there was something with the files there where you had to create different files for Mega Man 1, 2, and 3, and I could be remembering wrong. But I remember that despite the fact that I had beaten all three, whatever was going on with the save file, I could never progress past that to whatever the new content was at the end. And then fast forward to now, and it's on the Sega Genesis Mini, but also they limited run games did a release of it for the Genesis, and I haven't played it yet, but I did receive this recently. I bought the game and I have the analog Genesis, so that I can, I have to fire it up and finally do that content that I've never played.
Nick, how did you discover Mega Man 3? Was this game you saw early in life or later in life?
Well, I sorry, I don't want to flex on you guys, but I had the portable version of Mega Man 3 when I was a kid.
Game
Uh,
Boy?
on the Tiger Electronics
Oh
LCD
yeah.
beep beep
Oh
beepies.
man, you
I
were
still
balling.
have it, and I actually was gonna bring it out. I'll take some pictures. I was playing it. It's terrible. But yes, I do remember playing the portable version or the Tiger version a lot in the car and stuff whatnot. The game is surprisingly really long and deep for a stupid little LCD game, but it's not the same, obviously. I don't think I really played 3 that much. Um, other than that, I definitely played a lot of 2, but I don't think I ever owned 3. Unfortunately. So going back through, I played it a little bit later in life, in high school, with emulators and stuff. And I don't think I've ever beat it though. I never sat down and went through it because obviously it's hard. And then sitting down, played it and beat a few bosses today on it, and it is as hard as I remember, and also as a lot more fun now that I understand how everything works.
That soccer game. I'm kind of jealous, man. I wish I still had one of those. I had the Mortal Kombat one
I have
when
a
I was a
couple.
kid.
I also have Star Trek Next Generation and God, I think I have a Ninja Turtle one somewhere as well.
All I remember about those is I had baseball and I had bowling. And on some fifth grade field trip, we were told not to bring any electronic devices, and I did. I brought those two, and I didn't turn them on the whole time. I was like, oh, I shouldn't have brought these. But on the
Hmm.
bus on the way home, my friend asked for it, and I let him play it, and he had the sound on. He didn't even turn the sound off,
Oh,
and so he and I both got detention.
nice.
Uh, that's worth it.
And sound is literally what it plays. It
Yeah,
doesn't play anything else but sound, noise.
Beep, beep.
like
Like in this game for Mega Man 3.
It's
Uh,
amazing.
Real quick, I gotta give a shout out there in the beginning. Y'all may have noticed that we usually start out with some music from the game. That was a cut by from High 209. He was a guest on a previous episode, and thanks to him for letting us use that. I just want to get that out there. Mega Man 3 has got some awesome music, so I asked him if we could use that, and you can actually go download that album. Uh, it's out there. So, what did you how do you feel about this music there, Jack?
I think it's great. As I said earlier, it really peaked in Mega Man 2 and 3, and there were I'm sure there were great tracks after that, but nothing quite as memorable. You know, I could probably list if you played something for me from Mega Man 2, I could probably tell you what stage it's from. Mega Man 3, I don't know if I could do that, but I just know that you go into a level and it just hits you instantly, like, oh man, I remember this one. This is such a great track.
The title music for me on that opening screen is just so legendary to me. Uh,
Yes,
I
that's one I
love
could sing for you.
yeah, I
I
love
won't.
the way that starts out, and I've gone on YouTube and I've looked up so many different versions of people playing that, like electric guitar version, piano versions. Just man, it's so good. Like that's my favorite track from the whole game on this one.
Same. Yeah,
Agreed.
no, it's still not as good as the Mega Man 2s, but it is still very good.
Well, I think Mega Man 2 has the advantage, with the whole screen, thing, you're sliding up the building
Oh
and
yeah, the
there's
intro
wind
video.
blowing in the hair, yeah, that
Yeah.
that helps a lot. Mega Man 3, you're just looking at a start screen,
Yeah.
kind of
What happened to
failed
that?
there.
Come on, guys.
Well, I think that's part of, what, Keiji or Kaiji was saying was, the game was rushed out, so maybe that's one of the things that he's talking about that he would have liked to have polished? They put that stuff in the 2nd game, but it was absent in the 3rd, so maybe that's one of the things he was mentioning, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, the music is great, graphics are great. I mean, it's a Mega Man game, you can't go wrong really with that, am I right?
Slowdown though is atrocious.
Yeah, it gets a little rough on that original hardware. Jack, you were saying though that they fixed that, right, on the, Legacy Collection?
Yeah, I wasn't experiencing any of that when I played through it. I was just playing through it earlier today. Wasn't getting any slowdown. I will say though, we were just talking about this right before the show. Those games, all those old NES games, were so reliant on memorization and muscle memory, and that slowdown was just part of the experience. And
Yeah.
you learned that game with the slowdown. Like if I were still 10 years old and you handed me this legacy collection, I'd probably screw it up a whole bunch of times because my muscle memory was definitely, partially influenced by that slowdown.
It's also kind of like a safety net. Also, it makes games a bit easier to play. It's like Gradius 3, for instance, for the Super Nintendo. The speed, one of the speed levels near the end, it's much slower because of how many sprites there are. But it lets you navigate easier. Someone fixed the speed with a mod that you can like do to it to give it full speed again. But it makes it so much harder because it's now like not slowing down from the hardware. And I think a lot of these are also intentionally designed with those slowdowns involved, except for some of the parts like magnet. Uh, where the timing for how fast blocks appear kind of
Yeah.
just randomly changes because of the sprite timings. So you're like, do I jump now or not? I don't know.
That part. Oh, that part drove me crazy. For anyone who doesn't know or hasn't played this yet, I'm sure most of our listeners have. Right, it's Magnet Man stage, right? The
Yeah.
disappearing platforms. Yeah, I put that out on Twitter when I was playing through. That's the hardest part of the game for me. Is that part. Like all the Wily stages, you got the bosses from Mega Man 2, you still gotta run the gauntlet after all that. And I'm stuck on Metal Man or I'm sorry, Magna Man stage on these stupid disappearing platforms with the most annoying sound effect I have ever heard. If you're sitting there for 20 minutes on that part, that noise is gonna drive you insane. It's gonna go right to your brain, and it's gonna make you crazy, so please take a break.
I,
Please.
I I fortunately got the pattern after the second attempt, but it was slightly frustrating with that slowdown timing. That's for sure.
Somebody brought it up to me, they're like, "Why don't you just use Rush Jet?" And I was like, "Oh, why don't I? That's obvious now." Okay. I didn't have Rush Jet playthrough, but now I make sure to try to get it before I have to do that. So we talked about the music, we talked about graphics. I mean, other than is there any improvements that you guys could have seen with this game, Jack? Do you think any improvements you would have made? Maybe I think
Again, I
earlier you mentioned that charge shot, right?
Yeah, I think that's the only thing it's missing. That was such a great addition. And in Mega Man 4 they added the charge shot, and in Mega Man 5 they strengthened that to like a two level charge. And that's really the only thing that you go back to Mega Man 3 and you try to charge your shots and you're like, "Oh yeah, I can't do
Hmm.
that." Just like if you go back to Mega Man 2, you can't slide, and that's like infuriating.
Yeah.
um, if other than that, I really don't know what else they could have done. It's such a perfect game.
I'm basically right there with you. The only thing would be, some sort of optimization for, some of the slowdown for the original, but hardware. But other than that, fantastic, fantastic playthrough. Graphics are great. Just that the slowdown, it's pretty rough.
So where would you guys rank this one among the original 6 for the NES? Jack,
I'm gonna
I
put Yeah, I'm gonna
go
put
ahead.
it right at number one, and it's always close for me between Mega Man 3 and Mega Man 2. But when you look at how they sort of extended the formula a little bit with Mega Man 3, with revisiting those levels and incorporating the Mega Man 2 bosses, and some really great wily fights and stages, I really think 3 has to be my number one Mega Man game.
Nick, I have a feeling I know what your answer might be, but I'm gonna
It's
ask anyways. Where are you gonna rank this one out
probably
of the
second
original 6?
for me, but just two is got a big soft spot for me because that was the one I grew up with.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against number 2. 2 is so good. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
2 is
and really they're
iconic.
all good. I mean,
Yeah,
they're all good, but 2 is really stand out. Like, it's a really good game.
just the
So it's hard to
music for
argue.
me. I just have to, it's just you could just turn it on and listen.
And
That's true.
honestly, in 2, I kinda like the little mini bosses, or
Hmm.
I like those better in 2. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but, like, I don't remember too many of those in the 3rd one, just like a big cat thing, like you said,
Hmm.
the heady guy. Uh, so for me, I would rank this number 1 out of the original 6 as well, and I think mostly it's because the music and, is just so good to me, and the gameplay is really great. Extended everything, it's a little bit longer than the other 2. I just thought it was great. They brought back the bosses from part 2. It's really challenging game, but I don't feel like it's over challenging. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to glitch your way through this game like some other games out there that I won't mention.
What do you mean?
Ninja
Cheetah Man 2 is a
Ninja Gaiden,
work of art.
Or
Cheetah Man.
the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Oh, that game is so hard. I did
Basically
beat it.
impossible.
That
I
is.
never did. I was able to get to Shredder a couple of times.
Mm.
I know.
farther than
I
I
got
ever.
to the point where that underwater level I can do no problem,
Yeah,
but the Technodrome is just so hard.
a Technodrome is insane.
Yeah, I haven't made it to the Technodrome myself. I can get past the water part, but it's usually with like one turtle left. Like, damn. Like,
Out of all the like crazy hard games, the only one I still haven't beat all the way through is Battletoads.
Battletoads, yeah.
This game is so hard.
I don't even think I'm gonna try that. I think that's one I'm just gonna give up on and take the L for
I
life.
think I got all the way to like the water level or whatever, and like just
There's a water
this.
level?
Yeah,
God.
I don't know. I never made it
Turbo
past the
tunnel's
speed
not
life.
enough. Turbo
yeah.
tunnel wasn't enough.
There's so many turbo tunnels though. That's not the only one.
Okay, if you're telling me there's more than one, then I'm never gonna try. That's
Yeah,
not
the
an
game
option.
is
Well,
insanely hard.
let's just put this out there right now. There will never be a Battletoads. Uh,
The game
so
that you cannot play co-op because you'll never get past the first stage.
Right.
yeah, me and my brother tried to do that a few times back in the day, and I just remember him just knocking me off the cliff and stuff. It was no good. No fun. So, is there anything else that you guys would like to add about our Mega Man 3 episode, our game, before we wrap up this episode today?
No, other than it's great. I mean, it's Mega Man.
It's a fantastic game. If anybody hasn't tried it yet, you really need to. To me, I kind of hold this as a standard for excellent platformers, so I kind of judge other platformers off of this game. Like, so to me, that's
All
how good it is.
all I would say is if you haven't played it, make sure you go play it. It's pretty easy to get a hold of with the anniversary collection, and then you get yourself a whole bunch of other great games at the same time.
Definitely check out the other ones too. So, Jack, thank you for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. I loved hearing your story, man. It was great.
Thanks so much for
Uh,
having me. I appreciate it.
if you want to, you can throw out your Twitter handle and let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure, yeah. I'm on Twitter. It's at djackalman, and that's about it. I don't currently. I'm only tweeting about the New York Rangers and a couple of retro video game things.
But we're really hoping they win tonight, by the way.
Yeah, well, I guess by the time people hear this, we'll know.
Yeah, we'll know, right? Um, all right, so this is our season finale for season one. We are going to take the next couple months off. We got to take a break. I got a lot of pools to clean this summer, and I know Nick's got a lot of traveling to do, so he's going to be out and about.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Nick? Should we make them wait 2 months before we tell them what the season opener will be, or should I go ahead and tell them now?
I mean, that's your call, boss.
Hmm. I'll tell you what. We are gonna wait, but listen to the very end of this episode, and you'll get a hint. All right. All right. So once again, thank you, Jack, for coming. Thank you, Nick, as always, man. You're awesome, dude. Thank you so much for helping me do this podcast and everything.
Of
Basically do all
course.
the heavy lifting for me. It wouldn't even be possible without you, man. So thank you for helping me put this together. I feel like we had an awesome first run here with our first 6 episodes, and I'm really looking forward to doing season two.
I had a
And
lot of fun.
it's great, man. We've met some really cool people. So shout out to all of them. Sega Master Tim, he was the first. There'll only be one first, and it was you, Mr. Tim. So thank you for that. Shout out to Hyde as well for letting us use his music again. Thank you, man. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And please always remember the light at the end of the tunnel may be you.